What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends sits down for what should be a simple interview only to face disrespect so shocking that he walks off set in front of millions? It only took 33 seconds of Tamron Hall's condescending attitude for Denzel Washington to stand up, look her dead in the eye, and say the words that would end the interview forever. The morning started like any other taping of the Tamron Hall show. The studio audience filed in, excited to see Denzel Washington, a man who needs no introduction. 2 Oscars, decades of iconic performances, a reputation for being one of the kindest, most professional actors in the business. This was supposed to be a celebration of his latest project, a conversation filled with warmth and mutual respect. But what actually happened was something nobody in that studio could have predicted. Denzel walked onto the stage with his signature calm confidence. The audience erupted in applause. He smiled, waved, and took his seat across from Tamron Hall. She greeted him with a bright smile, but there was something in her tone that felt off from the very beginning. Something sharp, something testing. "So, Denzel," Tamron began, leaning back in her chair with a smirk, "let me just start by saying, we are so lucky to have you here. I mean, you actually showed up on time. That is rare for someone at your level, right?" The audience laughed nervously. Denzel's smile tightened just slightly. He nodded politely. "I believe in respecting people's time," he said simply. Tamron let out a laugh that sounded more dismissive than amused. Right? When a lot of big stars, they have their people call. They reschedule, they make demands. I just want to acknowledge that you are here. So, thank you for gracing us with your presence." The way she said it, the tone, it was dripping with sarcasm. Denzel's expression remained calm, but anyone watching closely could see the slight shift in his posture. He was already sensing where this might be going. "Happy to be here," Denzel replied evenly, keeping his composure. Tamron shuffled her note cards and tilted her head. "So, let us talk about your new movie. You have been doing this for what, 40 years now? 40-something years. I mean, at what point do you just, I do not know, retire, enjoy life, stop trying to prove something?" The studio went quiet. A few audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That was not a normal question. That was a jab. Denzel paused. He looked at her carefully, as if deciding how to respond. "I do not think I'm trying to prove anything," he said slowly. "I love what I do. I love storytelling, and as long as I have stories to tell, I am going to keep doing it." Tamron nodded, but her expression was patronizing. Sure, but come on, Denzel, be honest with me. Do you ever feel like maybe the industry has moved on? Like younger audiences are not really checking for, the older generation of actors anymore?" The disrespect was so blatant now that even the audience seemed stunned. A few people gasped quietly. Denzel sat back in his chair, his jaw tightening. He was still composed, still professional, but the warmth in his eyes was gone. "I think good work speaks for itself," Denzel said calmly. "Age does not determine relevance. Quality does." Tamron waved her hand dismissively. Okay, I hear you. But let us be real. Hollywood is obsessed with youth, and you are what, 70-something? At some point, you've got to admit that the roles are drying up. "I am 69, Denzel corrected, his voice firm now. "And I'm not struggling for roles. I'm choosing the roles I want to do." Tamron laughed again. That same condescending laugh, right? Choosing. That is one way to put it. She glanced at her notes and continued without missing a beat. "So, speaking of choices, let us talk about some of your past projects. You have had some flops, right? I mean, not everything you touch turns to gold. How do you deal with failure at this stage in your career? Does it sting more now because you feel like you were running out of time?" The audience was dead silent now. This was not an interview anymore. This was an attack, and everyone in the room could feel it. Denzel leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on Tamron. "Every actor has projects that do not perform the way they hoped," he said, his voice measured but firm. "That is part of the business. But I do not define myself by box office numbers. I define myself by the work I put in, the integrity I bring to every role, and the respect I show to my craft and to the people I work with." The emphasis on the word respect hung in the air. It was clear he was sending a message, but Tamron either did not care or did not catch it. She pressed on. "Okay, but let us talk about respect, because I have heard things, Denzel. I have heard that you can be, let us say, difficult on set, demanding. Some people even say you are a diva. What do you say to that?" Denzel's expression hardened. His voice dropped lower, more serious. "I say that is not true. I hold people to a high standard, including myself, but I have never disrespected anyone I have worked with. I treat people the way I want to be treated." Tamron raised her eyebrows. "So you are saying all those rumors are just made up, that nobody has ever had a problem working with you?" "I am saying," Denzel replied, his patience clearly wearing thin, "that I have worked with hundreds of people over 4 decades, and the vast majority of them would tell you I am professional, prepared, and respectful. If someone has a problem with me holding them accountable, that says more about them than it does about me." Tamron leaned back and crossed her arms. "Wow. Okay, so you are perfect. Got it." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. Denzel stared at her for a long moment, and you could see it in his eyes. He was done. "I never said I was perfect," Denzel said quietly. "But I do expect to be treated with basic respect, especially when I take time out of my schedule to be here." Tamron let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, here we go. The respect card. Denzel, you were on my show. I get to ask the questions I want to ask." If you cannot handle tough questions, maybe you should not be doing interviews. The audience gasped audibly this time. A few people even started whispering to each other. This was spiraling fast. Denzel remained calm, but his voice was ice cold now. There is a difference between tough questions and disrespectful questions. You have been condescending since the moment I sat down. I came here to talk about my work, not to be insulted. Tamron threw her hands up dramatically, insulted. Oh my goodness, Denzel, I am just asking questions. If you feel insulted, that is on you. Maybe you are just too sensitive. That was the line. That was the moment. Denzel slowly stood up from his chair. The studio went completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. I am not doing this, Denzel said firmly. He reached up and removed his microphone, calmly unclipping it from his shirt. I have been in this industry long enough to know when someone is trying to tear me down for no reason, and I do not have to sit here and take it. Tamron's eyes went wide. She clearly had not expected this. Wait, you are walking off? Seriously? Denzel, come on, sit down. Let us finish the interview. Denzel shook his head. No. I am done. You do not get to disrespect me and then act surprised when I stand up for myself. Tamron stood up too now, her voice rising. This is my show, Denzel. You do not just walk off my show. Denzel turned to face her fully, his voice calm but powerful. Watch me. The audience erupted. Some people were clapping. Some were gasping. Some were filming on their phones. Security started moving toward the stage, unsure of what to do. Producers were scrambling in the background, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Tamron pointed at him, her voice shaking with anger. You are being completely unprofessional right now. This is ridiculous. Denzel let out a short, humorless laugh. Unprofessional. You have spent the last 15 minutes trying to belittle me. You question my relevance, my talent, my character, and you think I am the one being unprofessional. Tamron crossed her arms defensively. I was just doing my job. Your job, Denzel said, his voice cutting through the chaos, is to have a conversation, not to tear someone down. There is a reason people respect me in this industry, and it is because I do not treat people the way you just treated me. The audience started clapping louder now. They were on Denzel's side, and it was obvious. Tamron looked around, realizing she was losing control of the room. Fine, she snapped. We do not need you anyway? Denzel paused at the edge of the stage and turned back one last time. You are right. You do not need me, but you do need to learn how to treat your guests with respect because this, he gestured around the studio. This is not it. And with that, Denzel Washington walked off the Tamron Hall show. The audience was on their feet, some cheering, some stunned into silence. Tamron stood there frozen, clearly trying to process what had just happened. Her producers rushed onto the stage trying to calm her down, but the damage was done. One of the producers signaled to cut to commercial, but it was too late. The whole thing had already been recorded. The whole world was about to see what happened when Tamron Hall pushed one of the most respected men in Hollywood too far. Backstage, Denzel was met by his team. They immediately asked if he was okay. He nodded, still calm, still composed. I am fine, he said quietly. I just was not going to sit there and let her disrespect me like that. His publicist looked worried. Denzel, this is going to be everywhere. The media is going to have a field day with this. Denzel shrugged, let them. I spoke my truth. I stood up for myself and I would do it again. Meanwhile, back on stage, Tamron was pacing back and forth, talking to her producers in hushed, frantic tones. We need to do damage control. One of them said, this is bad, really bad. Tamron shook her head, still in denial. He overreacted. He could not handle a real conversation. But even as she said it, she knew it was not true. The audience had turned on her. The energy in the room had shifted completely. And when the camera started rolling again after the commercial break, she had to face the aftermath. Well, Tamron said, forcing a smile as she addressed the audience. That was unexpected. Denzel Washington just walked off our show. I guess he could not handle the heat. The audience did not laugh. A few people even booed. Tamron's smile faltered. She quickly tried to redirect. Anyway, let us move on to our next guest, but the damage was done. The entire interview from start to finish had been a disaster, and it was all because Tamron had decided to treat a legend with disrespect. Back in the green room, Denzel was gathering his things. A few crew members approached him, apologizing for what had happened. You did not deserve that, Mr. Washington, one of them said quietly. She was way out of line. Denzel smiled gently. I appreciate that, but I am okay. I have been through worse. As he left the building, Denzel felt a sense of peace. He had stood up for himself. He had not let anyone diminish him, and that was worth more than any interview. The truth is, moments like this reveal character. They show who people really are when they are tested. Denzel Washington walked into that studio as a respected legend, and he walked out the same way because respect is not something you demand. It is something you earn, and Denzel has earned it 1,000 times over. Tamron Hall, on the other hand, learned a hard lesson that day. You can have all the power in the world. You can have your own show, your own platform, your own audience, but if you do not treat people with dignity and respect, none of it matters. Denzel did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to insult her back. He did not need to make a scene. All he had to do was stand up, state his truth, and walk away. And in doing so, he showed everyone watching what real strength looks like. Because here is the thing, you do not have to tolerate disrespect. You do not have to sit there and take it just because someone has a microphone or a camera pointed at you. You have the power to say no. You have the power to walk away. And sometimes that is the most powerful thing you can do. Denzel Washington understood that. He has always understood that. And that is why even after everything that happened that day, he walked out of that studio with his head held high. The interview was supposed to be a celebration. It was supposed to be an opportunity to highlight his incredible career, his latest project, his legacy. But instead, it became a masterclass in how not to treat your guests. Tamron started the interview with subtle jabs, little comments that seemed harmless on the surface, but were clearly meant to undermine him. She questioned his relevance, she questioned his age, she questioned his reputation, and when he pushed back, she accused him of being too sensitive. But Denzel knew better. He knew the difference between a tough question and a disrespectful one. He knew when someone was genuinely curious and when someone was just trying to provoke him. And he was not going to play that game. The moment he stood up and removed his microphone, the power dynamic shifted completely. Tamron was no longer in control. The audience was no longer on her side, and Denzel had made his point without saying much at all. That is the thing about true class. It does not need to be loud. It does not need to be aggressive. It just needs to be firm. And Denzel was nothing if not firm. When he told her, "You do not get to disrespect me and then act surprised when I stand up for myself," he was not just speaking for himself. He was speaking for every person who has ever been in a situation where they were treated poorly and felt powerless to do anything about it. He was speaking for every actor who has been dismissed because of their age. He was speaking for every professional who has been undermined by someone with a platform. He was speaking for every human being who has ever been talked down to and told they were overreacting when they tried to defend themselves. Denzel's walk-off was not a tantrum. It was not a diva moment. It was a statement that said, "I know my worth and I will not let anyone make me feel less than." And that is a message that resonated far beyond that studio, because everyone at some point in their life has been in a situation where they had to decide whether to stay and endure disrespect or leave and preserve their dignity. Denzel chose dignity, and in doing so he reminded everyone watching that you do not owe anyone your presence if they are not willing to treat you with basic human decency. The audience understood that. That is why they clapped. That is why some of them cheered. That is why the energy in the room shifted so dramatically. They were not just watching an actor walk off a talk show. They were watching a man take a stand. And Tamron, she was left standing on that stage trying to salvage a situation that was beyond saving. Because once you lose the respect of your audience, it is almost impossible to get it back. She tried to play it off. She tried to act like Denzel was the problem. But everyone in that room knew the truth. The cameras do not lie. The footage does not lie. And the way she treated him from the very first question made it crystal clear who was in the wrong. Denzel did not need to defend himself after the fact. His actions spoke for themselves. And that is the power of walking away with grace. You do not need to justify yourself. You do not need to explain yourself. You just need to know that you did the right thing. As Denzel left the building that day, he was not thinking about the backlash, or the media coverage, or what people would say. He was thinking about the fact that he had stayed true to himself. He had honored his values, and he had shown once again why he is one of the most respected people in the industry. Because respect is not about how famous you are or how many awards you have won. It is about how you treat people and how you allow yourself to be treated. And Denzel has always understood that balance. He has always been someone who commands respect, not because he demands it, but because he earns it through his work, through his character, through his consistency. And when someone tries to take that away from him, he does not fight back with anger or aggression. He simply removes himself from the situation. That takes strength, real strength, the kind of strength that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you question it. And that is why even though the interview ended in chaos, Denzel walked away as the clear winner. Not because he got the last word, not because he embarrassed Tamron, but because he protected his peace, he protected his dignity, and he showed everyone watching that you do not have to accept being treated poorly, no matter who is doing it. Tamron Hall learned that day that having a platform does not give you the right to tear people down. That being the host does not mean you get to be disrespectful, and that no amount of fame or success protects you from the consequences of treating people badly. Denzel Washington, on the other hand, reinforced what we already knew about him, that he is a man of principle, a man of integrity, and a man who will not compromise those things for anyone. So what happens when a legend is pushed too far? He stands up, he speaks his truth, and he walks away with his head held high. And that is exactly what Denzel Washington